Welcome to this week's video on commas. So this is a very important comma rule. The comma in a compound sentence is placed before the coordinating conjunction. Remember that coordinating conjunctions are those things that we also call fanboys, for and, nor, but, so, etc. So here we have Andy built a snowman and Jeff played with his dog. The comma goes before the coordinating conjunction. We use a coordinating conjunction to link two independent clauses. Each of these clauses can stand alone. Andy built, okay, Jeff played. So use a comma and the coordinating conjunction. In this sentence, where would you place the comma? Dan struggled with his homework, so his father helped him. You have again two independent clauses. Dan struggled, father helped. There's a fanboy, so the comma would go after the homework. Note that a dependent clause contains a subject and a verb, but it can't stand independently. Dependent clauses are often marked with words such as because or although, if, until. Dependent phrases and clauses help to clarify and add detail to an independent clause. Dependent clauses may appear at the beginning, middle, or end of a sentence. Okay, this is my favorite comma rule. When a dependent clause is placed at the beginning of the sentence, you place a comma between the independent clause and the dependent clause. So you place a comma after the dependent clause when the dependent clause opens the sentence. Why do I say it's my favorite comma rule? Because it's so important in terms of helping students write clearly. Let's look at the sentence. Before he took the test. Okay, we know that's a dependent clause because it starts with before, and before is one of those dependent words. So we put a comma at the end of it. Dan struggled with his homework, so his father helped him. So following the dependent clause, we then have two independent clauses. Dan struggled, father helped. We have a comma before the conjunction. So when a dependent clause is located after an independent clause, you don't use a comma between the two. We decided to go to the movies because we were bored. Now, if we switch the order, because we were bored, we decided to go to the movies, you would use a comma in that case. An essential clause or phrase is used to modify a noun. It adds information that's critical to the meaning of the sentence. And you don't use commas to set off an essential clause. So, the people who work in my office are loud. Well, the phrase, who work in my office, that's pretty important to the meaning of the sentence. So you would not set off that phrase with commas. The word that is almost always an indicator of an essential phrase or clause if it's used correctly. The tiramisu that I had at Joe's was great. A non-essential clause or phrase adds extra information to a sentence, and you can set that apart with commas. So a test is, could you eliminate it from the sentence without influencing the meaning of the sentence? For example, my brother, who lives across town, plans to throw a party. Just by saying it, you realize that the who lives across town is non-essential. Use commas to set off additional information. Steve said that he would propose to me on Valentine's Day, which is my favorite holiday. Again, that's sort of non-essential. The important part about the sentence is that Steve is proposing to this person. Place commas in a sentence to divide items in a list. So the commas help the reader to avoid confusion. The comma before the conjunction is generally required, but it can be omitted if there's no possibility of confusion. Now let's look at a sentence that can generate some confusion. Look at these sentences. Last month, Alex dated Mary, Ann, Lee, and Kim. Last month, Alex dated Mary, Ann, Lee, and Kim. last month, Alex dated Marianne, Lee, and Kim. So how many women did Alex date? Depending on where you put the commas in the sentence, you affect the number of people. So in the first sentence, clearly Alex is dating 2 people. Marianne Lee is her name, and Kim. In the second sentence, he's dating 4 people. And in the third, he's dating 3 people. So sometimes your commas are really important in a list. Just a last point here. This is a more of a nitpicky kind of thing, but when to use commas to separate adjectives? You use commas to separate adjectives when they provide an equal description of the noun. Here's the test. Could you put "and" before the adjectives? Could you reverse their order? If yes, use a comma. So there were 3 hungry kittens. Notice that you wouldn't put a comma between 3 and hungry. So, or you couldn't say 3 and hungry kittens. That wouldn't work. So you would not use a comma. A cranky bald man, you could say a cranky and a bald man. Big blue house, could you say big and blue house? No, so there you don't use commas. All right, that concludes this week's video on commas. Thanks for listening.